Hi, my name is Cyle Young, and I'm a literary agent, and welcome to The Big Idea. As an agent who in the last 3 years I've sold over 350 works, from books to illustrations to screenplays, in the general market, in the Christian market, in the illustration market, and anywhere in between, I'm excited to talk with you about how to turn your work into something that's a big idea. And it has a high concept with it that allows it to have mass appeal and really to be something that agents and editors want to really makes them salivate over and want to acquire and then put into the market for the rest of the world. And so that's what this class is about. I hope it will help you. We're going to first talk about the understanding of what a high concept idea is, and then move and transition to the big idea, which is especially even more important in nonfiction. And so high concept goes all across the market, from children's books to adult books to movies to screenplays to manuscripts and anywhere between, from fiction, nonfiction, and children's. You name it, it can be high concept. And we're going to explain what a high concept idea is, because it's really confusing to people, and to be honest, it's a little bit subjective depending on who you are. But there's this old kind of idiom, you'll know it when you know it. You will. You'll know when you hear a high concept idea, you'll know it. And so if you haven't heard one, you don't know it yet, because it's not high concept. And this class will help you work through, this workshop will help you work through what a high concept idea is. Because high concept is something that gets thrown around a lot. And we're going to look at 5 qualities of high concept ideas. And these are ideas that cross boundaries of genre, cross boundaries of audiences, and really brings out this light bulb going off moment in people's minds when they hear it. That's, wow, I need to tell everybody about that. Now I got to think about this. How does that work? And so it's those ideas that just makes your brain keep running. You can't stop thinking about it when you hear it. And so that's what a high concept idea is. And so we're going to look at 5 qualities of high concept ideas. Number 1, a high concept idea has a highly original concept or hook. It's something that's never been done before or never been done in that way, so much so that it just grabs your attention, it hooks you, it pulls you in, and you can't stop thinking about it. It's just like your light bulb goes off. It's like, wow, that is a great idea. How come no one's ever thought of that before? How come I've never thought of that before? And so you have that. I have this all the time when I'm watching Shark Tank on TV. It's like someone comes in with a product, and they display it, and you're like, that's a really good idea. How come I've never thought of doing that with a sponge? I got sponges in my house. And someone came up with it, and then they're making millions of dollars because it's a high concept idea. It's a solution to something everybody wanted solved, but no one ever really thought of doing with a simple product. High concept works the same way in books and stories. And so we're going to talk about that and really break down, how do you understand a high concept or a highly original concept or hook? And I want to share with you some examples. One of those examples is a famous book series, Harry Potter, by J.K. Rowling. And the high concept, the highly original concept, was an orphan boy who attends a school for wizards. Now, you might say, that's not an original idea. I've seen that done lots of times. You have, since Harry Potter. But not before Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling came on the scene with an idea that was unique and different, taking this boarding school thing, and I see boarding school books all the time as an agent. The boarding school thing is not new, but turning a boarding school full of wizards for an orphan boy whose parents had died that nobody wanted, it was an amazing idea. And I know I've heard people say the writing wasn't even that great. It depends on your view, and it got better over time. But what it was just this fantastic idea that makes you start thinking, what if an orphan boy went to a school for wizards? What would happen? How would it go? And so you start, in your mind, you have all these questions, and that's how you're moving into a high concept idea. And really, an idea like that has mass audience appeal. You could be a fan of YA books. You could be a fan of adult books. You could be a fan of anything, because it's just this idea that grabs you and makes you want to keep reading. And I think we've seen that as that book has sold hundreds of millions of copies. And so as it's such a high concept idea. Another one is an underprivileged child wins a golden ticket to a whimsical candy factory. That is the idea. That's the concept. This underprivileged child wins a golden ticket to a whimsical candy factory. We know it as Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl. But the truth is that came out, and it was a movie when I saw it, but it came out as a book, and it was something that was fantastic. The concept was so unique, so original, so whimsical, that it crossed the boundaries of its regular audience and moved into the vernacular of culture, especially into movies. And what happens is, when you have something that's high concept, it usually generally cinematic in a movie, because what happens is people who create movies are looking for an audience, a massive audience that will come in and pay for tickets. And when they're creating product, they're looking for that high concept idea, something that it won't just go to fans of science fiction or fans of romance, but it'll cross the boundaries and pull people in who may not necessarily be fans, but when they hear word of mouth, they'll come in and they'll fall in love with it. And that's high concept. Probably all of you watching this love Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I don't know which version you like is your best, with Johnny Depp or the original. Original is what I love the best. But we all know it to be something that was high concept. Now, if I did a story like that today, it wouldn't be, you just say, that's just like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Because that was what broke the boundary for the high concept. Once a high concept is done, anything that mimics it is no longer high concept, like boarding school books, these whimsical books where you go to some fantastic place, Wonka Land. That's ultimately, it's been done. So you can't do it again once it's been done. Another example, what about a samurai movie set in space? Star Wars, directed by George Lucas. Star Wars was something that was high concept. I've seen the videos and interviews with Lucas when they asked him, they weren't really sure that was going to be successful, because who would think that would break all the boundaries in our culture and just become so fantastic. And still, even today, in today's world, we're still watching Star Wars shows. Like, I'm going home tonight to watch a Star Wars, Clone Wars cartoon with my kids. So, it's still going on, and that came out in 1975. And so that you see, when something grabs the mass appeal of the audience, it doesn't matter if you like Star Wars, science fiction, spaceships. What it was is a story of hope, a story of connection. It was this hero's journey that was set in outer space with samurai swords that were lightsabers. But the concept took a samurai movie and really just put it in outer space, and that's what the concept was. That was a high concept. Now, any book, any movie that's set in outer space with any kind of light weapon, always compared to Star Wars, because that was the original high concept. And once it's been done, it can't be done again. There has to be a new, unique way to do it and look at it. But that was the concept. And another one here for you is a person's mind is the scene of a crime. Person's mind is the scene of a crime. That's Inception, directed by Christopher Nolan. And you'll see a lot of these I'm using are movies because the highest concept books end up really, and screenplays end up becoming movies that we know as part of what our culture is. It just becomes part of the dialogue of our culture. And so that was Inception, and it was taking this idea that a crime could be done in someone's mind, and you really could go in between minds and go into this sleep zone and all kinds of stuff that happened. And it was something that was so engaging, so unique, and so different. Now, you can't do that kind of thing without being compared to Inception, because that was the hook. That was the idea. That was so high concept that when people heard it, now you're thinking oh man, now I have to think about that. What would happen if somebody committed a crime in my mind? I had to go to sleep to try to catch him or defend myself. Now you're just having all these ongoing thoughts for days and days. I'm still thinking about the ending of that movie, and I think it was 10 years ago that I saw it. And so that's how something is high concept. So that's number one. Number two, a high concept idea asks a what if question. And so not only is it this original concept that has mass audience appeal, that really breaks boundaries, crosses genres, crosses age categories, crosses audiences, and brings it all into one, and has this hook that just makes this light bulb go off in your mind, they can also, a high concept can ask a what if question. And so let me give you some examples of a what if question. Look at this one. Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. What if there was an amusement park full of cloned dinosaurs and they escaped? Now, that's a great, amazing thing. But the movie came out in 1995. I remember reading this book as a middle grade student. I gave it to my dad. My dad read it. It was full of language. My dad never said anything about the language of the book, which was surprising at my house. And so I remember he was so excited to go see the movie because the book crossed the boundaries. My dad did not like science fiction. That wasn't his thing. but it was so well done, and it was something that, who doesn't love dinosaurs? And who wouldn't want to go to an amusement park full of dinosaurs? And it connected with everybody who read that book, and the movie connected. It was amazing because it was high concept, and it asked this what-if question on something that was normal. And really, what if a tiger got out the zoo? That's kind of something like that we have happen from time to time, or a lion. But what if it was dinosaurs? And how would that go? And that's what the book is about. Another one here is, what if Amish refugees had to launch into space to survive destruction, only to be confronted by vampires? This is Amish Vampires in Space by Carrie Neitz. I believe Carrie was at a conference with another agent, and the agent challenged him in the room, and so he ended up deciding to go ahead and accept the challenge and wrote the book. And it's this really weird what-if twist on, hey, what if Amish refugees had to go to space? What if there's a point in the future we all got to, and there's still Amish people, and they go to space only to be confronted by vampires, and they need to be able to embrace that or fight that to survive? And what if? Now you're asking all kinds of questions. How would the Amish embrace technology? How would they get to space? Why would they want to go to space? And all of these questions, your mind just keeps racing. And now we know that we've got a high concept idea. You can't stop thinking about it. And maybe you're not interested in that idea, but I think it's pretty high concept. Another what if question. What if the three little pigs were ninjas? Now, we all know the three little pigs. We grew up with the story of the three little pigs. But what if they were ninjas? How do we flip that on its head? Corey Rosen Schwartz wrote a great book about the three little ninja pigs. And so you took the familiar, asked a what if question, and now we've got this really unique concept for a book. Another one we know as a movie is, what if Peter Pan grew up and had a family? My family just watched this recently with my kids, and it is Hook, directed by Steven Spielberg. And Hook is the story of Peter Pan when he becomes this grumpy old man who forgets where he came from, forgets Neverland, forgets he was Pan, and now he's just living in London, and he's a boring, mean, grumpy person. And all of a sudden, the whole movie is about this journey back to really just rediscovering himself and finding his youthfulness again and all that. But it's a story that we connect with because we all know and love Peter Pan. But it was twisted. It wasn't just another Peter Pan tale. It was Peter Pan as a grumpy 40-year-old man in London. What a great concept. What a what-if concept that really engaged the audience. It still is probably, in my opinion, the best Peter Pan film that's ever been made. And it was so well done. Another one here is, what if, for a nonfiction, what if you only had to work 4 hours each week and retire? Now, I know we all don't want to work 40-hour weeks. And this is the 4-Hour Work Week by Timothy Fenris. And nobody wants to work 40 hours a week. Nobody wants to work 60. Nobody probably even wants to work 20. And so Timothy's book is about really, how do you work 4 hours, still be productive, still get rich, still have people working for you while you're sleeping, while you're not working, and only do it in 4 hours. And so that's the concept. So he not only gives you a book about it, but he teaches you how to do it for yourself. He gives you the how-to, the instruction, he gives you his story, and then moves you in. And really, this is a big idea nonfiction using a high concept, which we're going to talk about, the strategy of how to do that at the end. But he did it by asking a what-if question. What if you could make a living and retire by working 4 hours a week? Wouldn't you want to? Yes, I'll raise my hand. That'd be awesome. But that's what the book is about. And it had massive appeal because no matter what industry you're in, what business you run, who you are, we all want to work less and make more. And that was the attraction to the book. Next here, number 3 in the qualities of high concept is a high concept has mass audience appeal. And I've mentioned this before, but I'll show you some more examples of this, but it just has mass audience appeal. If it's only for a certain group of people, it's not mass. If it's only for people who are grieving, it's not going to be high concept, because it has to cross boundaries. If it's only for people who are in one specific niche, and that's all it's for, it's just not high concept. It can be a great concept, and there's books out there that are published every day that are not high concept titles. Not every book is going to be high concept or has to be high concept. Some books are just written to fill a need in the market. But those books that are high concept have the capability to have a long shelf life and to sell a lot of copies if they can catch hold with that massive audience. And they really have an opportunity to move into movies and all kinds of other mediums because they're going to gravitate to a larger audience. And so a high concept idea has mass audience appeal. Let's look at some examples. A story about survivors left behind after the rapture. The book is Left Behind by Jerry Jenkins and Dr. Tim LaHaye. That book has sold it's buku number of copies, And Jerry Jenkins is now one of the best writers in the CBA, the Christian market, and really just has done so well. I don't want to guess how many millions or hundreds of millions it's sold, but it's impressive. And it really is just a question that a lot of people who are Christian or religious would ask. What happens at the end of time? What happens to people who are left behind after the promised rapture and Christian religious theology happens? And it's a story of the survivors surviving. That's the whole premise of it. They're just surviving in the events that were predicted in what they believe it to be. And so that's ultimately the book. But it had mass audience appeal because it didn't matter if you're a 60-year-old woman or you're a 16-year-old kid or anywhere in between or you're a 40-year-old guy. This was something in this book for everyone because it was something in that culture and in that broad audience that everybody wanted to know about and talk about. So it was a great way to write a high concept idea. Now the problem is you can't ever write that again. No one else can go out and do that again because it will always be compared to Left Behind. Because when you've done it first, you're the high concept. You're the original. Another one here is a love story between two teens dying of terminal cancer. The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. Now, I've read a lot of teen romance and seen teen romance movies, and the truth is I never had seen one or heard of one where teens were dying of terminal cancer until this book. And now, every time I see books, it's always compared to The Fault in Our Stars because now it was so transformative in the mindset of especially that generation, the millennial generation, when this book caught hold, is now everything's compared to it. If you have stories, especially of teens dying in a book, it's going to be compared to this because that's a highly original concept. I've seen other variations of this now, and I've seen them all end up being movies. I saw Where There Was Space Between Us, where a girl on Earth fell in love with a boy on Mars, and then he ended up coming to Earth, but he can't live here because of his bone density and all that. And so there's a lot of these type of books that have been made now, but they really had their way paved by John Green in his book because this was that mass audience appeal. Because who doesn't want to read a love story about, and who doesn't want to connect with kids who are falling in love while they're dying of terminal cancer? And it just pulls at your heart. And I remember people saying they would go and watch this movie, read this book, and they would just sit there and they would just weep because it was so touching and so transformative. It crossed over the boundaries of age groups and interest. And so that's how you get that mass audience appeal. Another one here is, this one's a big one, A Comic Book Guide to Surviving Middle School. Now, this is known as Diary of a Wimpy Kid by Jeff Kinney. And really, this is something that can be embraced by every single middle schooler ever because it's a unique way to write and to speak into a culture of today. And this book has transformed the industry. This series has come out, and it's created a whole nother line of graphic novels, Dog Man, you name it, they're out there, because of the success of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, because it was something that, although it didn't really cross over into the appeal of adults, it crossed over the appeal into elementary and middle grade students massively. It was a book that they could read, that they could enjoy, that wasn't full of words and boring stats and all the things they would have in their school library. It was a book written for them. And it was written for them in such a way that they could just pour over it and through it. And so it had that mass audience appeal in a very specific age range, but connected with all of them. Not just a little bit of them, not just the girls who like athletics or the boys who like music. You broadened it. It got every single student interested in that, and that's how it grabbed the attention and had that mass audience appeal. Let's take a look at this next one. A Cinderella story set in modern LA. This is Pretty Woman, directed by Gary Marshall. Now, we all know the story of Cinderella. The glass slipper, the midnight clock, the fairy godmother, and Pretty Woman doesn't typically resemble that story, but it is a Cinderella tale. They've taken the princess and the Cinderella and switched her out with a prostitute. You've got the prince, who's a rich businessman, and there's not a lot left of the glass slipper, but there's this fun story that's connected of this love story that really is a Cinderella tale. And so you've taken the Cinderella and twisted it and said, what if she was a prostitute in LA and she fell in love with this businessman? And that's the high concept. That's why, of course, you have Julia Roberts and this awesome music and whatever. It makes this great movie, but it was original concept. And we have a lot of Cinderella tales now that are still twisted, and they still can be high concept because when you just twist the concept like that, and you twist the setting, the plot, you can't just twist the character. It's not just a high concept to switch a character from a girl to a boy. You couldn't just make Cinderella a boy and it'd be high concept. That would be a twist for sure, but it's really the same story. And so it goes beyond just changing the character. A Cinderella story, like Pretty Woman, is not just a switch making Cinderella a prostitute. It's a switch of who the character is, where the setting is, how the story goes, and there's multiple twists, but really it twists the plot and as something that's unexpected, like that you would never think, such as another one we talked about earlier, The Three Little Pigs, but there's a twist on that one. There's a book where the pigs are the villains and the wolf is the good guy, and he was just trying to be a friendly neighbor, and those pigs were jerks. That's twisting the plot. It's not twisting it to three little wolves and making the pigs the bad guy. It's just twisting the plot, not just the characters. So it has to be a unique twist on the plot or the entire premise of the book, which we see in Pretty Woman in that movie. Some others here are ferocious aliens invade the world, but they don't have eyes and track humans by echolocation. This is A Quiet Place, directed by John Krasinski. Now, this was a great movie. If you haven't seen it, it was awesome. And what happens is, when this came out, it was just this really suspenseful thriller of a movie because it was so unique and different. Because we've seen movies where aliens invade and they take people and they capture them and take them up in spaceships. We've never seen one where you had to be completely quiet the entire time because the moment you make a sound, you could die. That was the high concept twist. We've got an alien movie, it's just like every other alien movie, except for the big plot twist of the echolocation, and you have to be quiet all the time. So much so that you got to put your baby in a box with the oxygen mask to try to keep it from being heard. Like, that is unique and different, and it's a twist on a concept that we've seen a lot of alien movies. That's a regular concept, but the high concept is making it by echolocation. And then we had another version of that on Netflix. We had Bird Box, where they had to do it, and they had to basically blind themselves because the aliens, if they could see it, would kill them. So those have all been done. You really can't do those now anymore because they'll all be compared to those original things that were twisted on the plot premise of what an alien movie is. And then another one is, for a unique twist, is teenagers fighting to death on television. We know this is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. The Hunger Games was a dystopian book that was twisted with one really big difference: a battle royale death match of teenagers fighting on television to survive. There was a Japanese version of this, but most people don't know that. But when this came into the U.S., it was a unique twist on the dystopian. And I remember all the problems, all the people frustrated, and how this is going to make it. The kids are terrible, and they want to do this. But it hasn't done that, thankfully. But ultimately, it was this really unique plot twist on a dystopian movie. Because there have been lots of movies out there, and this book came out that really tweaked that, and we'd had some where we got Waterworld, we got all these, and Waterworld was a really original concept for dystopian, like the whole world's water. That's another plot twist. Hey, Kevin Costner survives the apocalypse to live in this world that's post-apocalyptic, but wait, also it's all water. That's the plot twist. That's the premise twist. That's the twist. Because it's not just like The Postman where they're just surviving in a nuclear wasteland. It's something unique and different. And so it takes the familiar and then twists it in such a way that it resonates with people. It's like, oh, wow, I never thought about that. That would be great. What if the post-apocalyptic world was all just water? And how would you survive and live on it and thrive on it? And that would be Waterworld. And the same here, what if you had to live in a society where your teens had to go into death matches? I've seen a lot of movies and books since Hunger Games. Try this. 3% is a foreign film and foreign television series that has a kind of their own play on this and a survival of kind of the smarter students. But again, it's Hunger Games-esque because Hunger Games was the first to make that big twist. Number 5, a high concept idea can be explained in 1 or 2 sentences. You'll notice that I've explained most of these with 1 or 2 sentences because they should be. If you can't say your idea in 1 or 2 sentences and get people to grasp and gravitate to it, it's not a high concept idea. And I just sat through a conference where I had all these people pitch me, and it was great. I found some books that I really wanted to see, but the people that take 10 minutes to tell me about their book, they just don't have a high concept idea, or if they don't know what it is. And you really need to be able to say in 1 or 2 sentences, you need to be able to pull it all down into one really interesting tidbit, and then you have to have a twist to go with it that grabs people and makes them say, I never thought about that. That's a great idea. And that's how you make it high concept. So here's a few more to look at to explain how to do this, or some others that you may be familiar with. Let's look at this one. This Present Darkness by Frank E. Peretti. An unseen supernatural battle takes place in a small town. I believe the book starts with basically unseen forces fighting. I think is what I remember on that one. I started reading. I never finished it. I know a lot of people are Peretti fans, but it really launched Peretti's career. It is the his publisher that published him. They just built a huge building in Chicago. They call that building the building that Peretti built, the house that Peretti built, basically, because he sold so many copies that ultimately he paid for their building with his royalties and the work that he did. And so it's this idea of how you can explain that. Now you know what the book's about. It is an unseen spiritual battle that takes place in a small town. That's the book. There's a lot more that goes into it, but that is the book. Now, you may want to say, okay, what would that look like? This spiritual battle happening in this small town. That's the book. One that I love, it's a children's book. It's called Creepy Carrots by Aaron Reynolds. And it's carrots conspire against a bunny that tries to eat them. I love this one. This has got the big twist, because now it's not the bad guys, not the bunny in this story. It's really these creepy carrots that are trying to scare and kill the bunny, or he thinks they are. And so the carrots, they conspire and scare the bunny. It's a very scary book, really. And they're creepy and trying to get him to run away and not eat them. And the premise, it's taking the familiar, bunny eats carrots and flips them, and carrots eat bunny. And it's just a really cute, really great book. I have it on my shelf as one I refer to a lot when I think high concept and how to restructure my mind on creating high concept ideas. So Creepy Carrots is a great idea for that, especially for children. Some other ones to look at. Popular one right now, of course, a Game of Thrones series by George R.R. Martin. He pitched this, and I'm going to give you a caveat here. He pitched this as Lord of the Rings meets the War of the Roses. That's how he pitched it to the publishers. Now, I don't advise doing that. I had somebody ask me that in my last conference. Should I just do that? And the problem is everybody does that. And so unless your writing is at the level of George R.R. Martin's, and his writing is stellar, it's amazing. I have this one phrase where he describes someone stepping on moss on my wall. I've not even read the entirety of his book, but I read this one passage, I'm like, wow, that's how I want to write. That's really good writing. And so when you write like him, you can get away with doing this. You can say The Lord of the Rings meets The War of the Roses. It's gritty. It's basically everything about The Lord of the Rings flipped up on its head, and that's what his whole premise was. That's what he tried to do, and that's what he did. He took what was known historically in the UK of this War of the Roses, and he added it to The Lord of the Rings, and then he just made it really gritty and really raw, and that was the whole premise. And then that was the pitch. Lord of the Rings meets War of the Roses, and people looked at the writing, and yeah, that's what it was. And so that was the pitch. I love this one. This is actually a great book. It's an elite teenage spy who falls in love with an ordinary boy. The book is called I'd Tell You I'd Love You, But Then I'd Have to Kill You by Ally Carter. To me, this is a high concept title that just on the title alone, I would want to take a look at this pitch. And if the writing was good, I would want to represent it because it's a great title. I know it's longer than the 3 or 4 words that they tell you to put on most titles. It doesn't matter. When it's that good, it's that good. And so this book, I think this book's doing really well, but it makes sense. We know the whole book by the title. I tell you I love you, but I have to kill you. But now I'm wondering, okay, why does she have to kill him? Why can't you tell him? And then when I find out it's a spy, it makes sense because she's falling in love. She's a spy. She can't tell him. And then this is a YA book. So the even more interesting is taking this premise of spy romance and then throwing it down into high school was a really great twist on a familiar genre and pulling in this great high concept title as well. And so that's how you take a couple of these qualities, blend them together to make a really good high concept idea. And then last, as good as the enemy of great. This is actually the first sentence of the book. It's the concept of the book, that good is the enemy of great. It's a business leadership book talking about how good is the enemy of great. It keeps you from being great, but just being good and just trying to be good. And the book is called Good to Great by Jim Collins. It's a great book. I paid $25 for that one sentence. The book's good, but it's not mind-blowingly good, the rest of it. But the idea, the concept was enough to make me to fork over $25 for a hardcover copy of it. And so when you have something that's that great, I think about this phrase and I refer to this phrase over and over again. That's how you know it's high concept. It's transformative. Just thinking about, yeah, good is the enemy of great. I have to remember that. And I have to try not to be good. I have to try to be great for myself and for others. And so those are the 5 qualities of what it is to be high concept. I'll review those for you real quick. Number 1, a high concept idea has a highly original concept or hook. Number 2, a high concept idea asks a what if question. A high concept idea, number 3, has a mass audience appeal. Number 4, a high concept idea has a unique twist on the plot or the premise of the book, not just the character. That's important. Don't just change the character. That's not enough. You'll see people who will just look at something and think, well, they just changed the character. That was high concept. That is not enough. Remember, this is subjective, but that won't be enough. Change the twist and the plot or premise. You can also change the character. That's okay, but change the plot or premise. And that's where the surprise comes. And then number 5, a high concept idea can be explained in 1 or 2 sentences. But don't do the comparative thing. Don't say Lord of the Rings meets this or Harry Potter meets that. Everybody does it. Don't say this business book, Stephen Covey meets this. Find a better way to describe it, because if it's high concept enough, there's going to be an idea that's going to be amazing there, and it will resonate with people. And so before I go into the next part for you, the 4 types of nonfiction, I just want to say this. To know something is high concept, there's a very simple test. Go to friends and family and then share with them a list of ideas. And then come back the next day and ask them which ones they remember, which ones they've been thinking about since. If they say, I really thought about it, I can't remember any of them, you didn't have any high concept ideas. It's that simple. Because if you had a high concept idea and it had mass audience appeal, your family, your friends would say, oh yeah, that one was a really good idea. Like, I've been thinking about that. Like, I thought about that all night. Here's what I think. The moment you do that and you get multiple people to have that conversation with you, that's the high concept idea. That's where you keep delving into to see if that's the big idea that you need to write about in your fiction, your nonfiction, or your children's book. That's how it works. You put it out there into the world. I know authors don't want to tell people because they'll steal my idea. Yes, they will. I'll be honest with you. You have the big idea. Like, I've got a book right now that we're contracting. I would love to tell you the title of it. But if I told you the title is like the Ali Carter title, it's perfect. It's a big idea. It's high concept. If I tell you to you, someone out there will be like, oh, I could go write that. And so I won't tell the title until we sign that book. And she's moments away. I think Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, hopefully, we will have that thing signed, and I'll be able to put it out there in the world and tell people about it in classes like this. But it's a very high concept idea. And it honestly was a real easy sell for her because of the high concept idea. And she's a debut author. So sometimes if you want to say, how do I get over the debut hurdle? How do I get over like the low platform hurdle? Get a great high concept. It'll jump you past a lot of hurdles because people won't be able to quit thinking about it. And they'll be like, oh my goodness, this could go to the masses. That's how you jump over the hurdles. You can jump those hurdles of platform if you have the high concept, the big idea to be the springboard for you. So let's look at the 4 types of nonfiction now, because high concept really fits super well in fiction and children's and nonfiction. But with a nonfiction, there's a twist. And I want to kind of share with you the twist to high concept is all those things still apply. You twist the familiar, you need to have a mass audience, it needs to have original concept or hook, it needs to ask this what-if question, and it needs to be explained in 1 or 2 sentences. Like, all those things are true. But nonfiction is a little bit different because there's this teaching aspect, there's this true aspect. And so let me share with you 4 types of nonfiction. And the last type I share of the 4 is really where we're going to move into the big idea, which is high concept. And I want to show you how to get there and how to see if your nonfiction, especially that you're working on, whether it's children's nonfiction or adult nonfiction, can get you there. So the types of nonfiction that we have, nonfiction that's narrative. It's you writing your story, biography. There's just a story. There's this narrative where we're just going through it. And so we have narrative nonfiction. We might see this in like crime nonfiction, where it tells like a crime story, like maybe like an FBI case. And we might see this in someone's memoir. And so those are some narrative aspects in nonfiction. So it's a big category. There's lots that encompass in that. We don't have time to go through all of that. But you'll know it when you see it. There's a story aspect. It could be biography. There's a lot of even nonfiction for children now has these narrative elements to it. Narrative nonfiction is becoming big, especially in like middle grade. And so that's a big category. Another category of nonfiction that we see is academic. Nonfiction that's created to teach students or adults. Give instruction, to give knowledge. It doesn't have to be academic. It can be knowledge-based, where it may teach you about the history of baseball. That would be very academic. You'd be learning, even though it wouldn't be institutional learning, it'd still be learning, academic. You're gonna gain knowledge as you read it. You're gonna see this in books that are for schools and libraries, and there's this big category of academic books that are educational in aspect, and you learn something. And then there's another category. So we've got narrative and we've got academic. And then we have another category that's how-to. So this would, self-help books would be into how-to. It's just your how-to is how you help yourself move through it with maybe somebody else's story to move you along, or somebody's instruction, or like intellectual information to move you through. But it's how-to. We see this a lot in how-to books: how to fix your car, how to do this, how to do yoga, how to better yourself, how to overcome depression. Like, we see a lot of how-to books. And so those are some three big categories: how-to books, academic, educational, like informational books, and then narrative books. And then, so those are all exist separate. So you can have three concentric circles that all exist. And so you've got like academic, you've got narrative, and then up here you've got how-to books. And so what happens is, if you take those categories and you start crossing those circles over each other, and you get them to a point where all three circles intersect, there's this middle overlap. That's the sweet spot where the book is a little bit how-to, the book's a little bit academic, and it's also a little bit narrative. And when you get the blending of all three different sections of nonfiction, you really enter to a place of the big idea. That's where the big idea resides, the high concept resides. And because a book like that is going to have more audience appeal. Because people who like informational books, educational books and academic books are going to feel like there's something there for them. People who like how-to or self-help books are going to feel like there's something there for them. And then people who like narrative, where they like stories juxtaposed with those other things, they're going to feel like something's for them. And so now you've taken a concept that may easily fit in any of the three by itself, and when you've blended some of those three elements, you've now crafted something into a big idea with a takeaway, with a teaching, and with a story to impassion the reader to move forward and change and become maybe something different, or to learn a skill. And so those are where you bring it together. I'll give you an example. The book I mentioned, From Good to Great, that book is it's a big idea book. There's a narrative part of the book where it really is Jim Collins talking about the story of how he went from good to great, and how he had to have failures and learn to be great instead of just being good. So that's in the book. There's also this informational, educational, academic section where he teaches you and shares the process of himself and other companies who also walk through the same path, such as Kodak and others. And so there's that in there as well. And then there's the part where it challenges the reader and kind of gives you some steps to apply in your own life on how you too can move from just being good to great. So when you take those three elements and you put them together, you get a big idea. Now, I know what you're saying. My book's got all that stuff in it. Yes, your book may have a little bit of all three of those in there. And so that's moving you to the big idea. Because I think the big thing that people are missing is you can take all three and put them together, and it'll be a bigger idea. But what makes the biggest idea is when you look at that all through the high concept filter. When you've examined the book with a high concept filter of saying, is there some twist on my doing this different? Is my book about dieting, but I'm doing it in such a way, I'm twisting how it's ever been done. I've asked a what if question. What if you could lose 50 pounds in 30 days by only drinking lemon juice? That's a what if question. And if it worked, and you had the science to back it up, and you had the how to help teach people how to do it, and you had the narrative, your own story of success, then that could be a big idea where you could back it up if that was something that would engage the masses. Now, I'm just throwing that out there as a random what if question, because not every what if question is going to be high concept, but they ask a what if question. And so some of the things, like here, I'll give you an example. Collagen. A year and a half ago, collagen was a big thing. And there's a big trend out there, and everybody that I talked to in the kind of food industry was trying to figure out how to put collagen in their shakes and their meals. And I had publishers saying, can you get me a collagen cookbook? Like, I have looked for a collagen cookbook for a year and a half. If I could get a collagen cookbook that has the academic part, the how-to part, the narrative part, big idea all over it, high concept. Because a diet book with collagen has not been done yet, still to this day. There's not one out in the market. And because diet books are overdone, we all know that. But what if there was this new one, or this food cookbook that was done with collagen? There's not been one out put in the market yet. And so when you get that big idea, it's where you can find a bigger audience. You can find people who are trying to hit the trends and find something new in the fads, and that's how you get into it. And so you have to filter that big idea that you create by blending the narrative, the how-to, and the academic portions, the information portions, by hitting that sweet spot and then filtering it, looking just at that big idea through a lens that's a high concept lens and saying, have I checked off those high concept boxes? And then have I taken it out and told that big idea to people and then followed up with them to see if that big idea has resonated with them, if it's made the light bulb go off in their mind and made them ask more questions or made them come back and say, hey, I'm still thinking about that thing you told me. And so big ideas that are high concept require research. They require investment of time to perfect and to go out into the world and ask people to see if it meets a need in their life. Because generally speaking, a big idea in nonfiction is going to speak into something. It's going to give information. There's a lot of big ideas even in middle, like in a young children's nonfiction, whereas there was recently a book that was written about Hitler and talking about Hitler and constructing about the World War II, but it was told from the perspective of the youth that were under Hitler, kind of the youth in his culture and really what they had to go through. Instead of talking about Hitler and teaching kids about Hitler in a boring way like we always do, they taught it through really showing the oppression of the youth in the society of Hitler and found a unique twist on an educational concept of teaching World War II and the atrocities of Hitler, but by going through a different perspective, by going through the eyes of the youth in that culture. And so that's how you come at something from a different perspective. It still is a massive audience. World War II is a huge audience, always, in books. And so when you do that, you can twist up the audience and really speak into that market with a big idea. And so that's where the big idea is, that fourth category. It's where everything crosses over from the other three, and you start to have this big idea that needs to be filtered again through a high concept lens. Because the big idea lives at the intersection of the other three. And so you as an author, you want to write high concept books and big idea books. And now you can write high concept without a big idea because big idea really moves more into the nonfiction side. But you want to write as an author high concept and big idea. You want to figure out what your big idea is, and then you want to filter it through a high concept lens. Or you can go the other way. This is my high concept idea. Now I got to figure out, if it's nonfiction, how to make it a big idea too that speaks and uses all those aspects. Because as I go down to children's, those educational aspects, those academic aspects have to be STEAM: science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Those have to be part of that educational aspect with the how-to of teaching our kids, and ultimately the narrative element as well. And so you don't have to have all three. Sometimes it'll edge more into one or two of the others, depending on the type of book or the subgenre of nonfiction that's in. But that's how you begin to birth that big idea and then ultimately evaluate and tweak it until the high concept also brings it to be a bigger and bolder idea in your book. And so that's big ideas and high concept. Hopefully, you're now getting an understanding of high concept and big idea. It took me a while, I'll be honest, as an author, when I was an agent, this isn't high concept enough. I'm looking for something that's more high concept. I've had a lot of those conversations before I really figured out what high concept was and was able to teach it to others. And now I know and I see it, and I'll know, because if I see a submission and I don't ever think about it again, it's probably not a big idea, it's probably not high concept. But the ones I get that I see that instantly gives me that light bulb moment and I can't stop thinking about, that's the ones I know I want to work with. And honestly, that's the ones I'm really interested in offering contracts to, because then I think I can do something with it because there's a big idea behind it, or it's really high concept. And I think I've got a great chance of finding an editor who also will feel the same, who will be able to convince their team that there's a mass audience for it, which was what we're looking for every book. So I hope this helps you understand high concepts and big ideas and moves you on a path while you're writing your fiction, nonfiction, or children's books. It helps you write the big idea and write the high concept and have the success that you want to have in your writing career. Thanks.